still do a lot of work for them on the side when I can, but I'm no longer technically on staff anymore. And what we're going to talk about today is just kind of some of the basics and some of the things that you guys deal with when you're working with your residents that have dementia, whether that be Alzheimer's or frontotemporal Lewy body, whatever. And we're going to kind of talk about specifically some of the behaviors that you see and ways to communicate effectively with them. The first thing we want to talk about is that we don't like to label behaviors as negative behaviors or problem behaviors anymore, okay? Because honestly, behavior is just a form of communication. So if you think about a small infant that can't speak yet, and if they're screaming and flailing their arms and legs and everything like that, they can't tell you, Mom, I'm starving to death, please feed me, or Mommy, my tummy hurts, please pick me up, or I need my diaper changed, right? So they communicate with you verbally and through their what? Through their behavior, through moving their arms and legs. And so with Alzheimer's disease, language skills get affected and they can't communicate to you what their thoughts, needs, or feelings are. So we want to remember that behavior is just communication. So we don't want to label it as negative or bad or problematic. They're just trying to tell you something. So when I think about that, what are they trying to tell us? It's like figuring out a mystery or solving a puzzle. What are they trying to tell us? And then what are their needs or feelings? So if you can listen to them, look at the behavior, and also listen to the words and try to figure out how does that relate? What are they trying to communicate? What needs or feelings might they have? You always want to look at the biggies, like are they hungry, are they thirsty, are they tired, do they not feel well, do they need to go to the bathroom? All those things you want to evaluate to see if that's contributing to it. And then how do you interpret what they're communicating and how do you communicate back? And it's so important for us to remember that communication, when we're communicating with someone, whether they have dementia or not, there's all the nonverbal stuff that goes along with it, right? You hear that, I think it's only like 7% of communication is the actual words spoken. The rest of it is facial expression and body language. So if you're trying to tell Miss Jones, it's fine, I'm gonna take care of you, I'll be right there. If you're smiling and your body language is soft and approachable, that's one thing. But if you say, Miss Jones, I'm gonna take care of you, I'll be right there. That's a completely different message, right? So we've got to make sure we're really aware of our facial expressions and our body language when we're communicating back. We try to, and families do this as well, the family caregivers try really hard to keep folks speaking our language. So, if Dad was an engineer out at Oak Ridge and now he's having difficulty putting his clothes on, we just think, oh, surely if we were my Dad, no, you put your socks on before you put your shoes on. He's going to get it, right? Because he was an engineer. But we need to not try to make them speak our language as much as we need to begin speaking their language. How do they communicate? How do they express themselves? What do they understand? So we want to do that. Also, when we're talking about behaviors and before we label them a problem behavior or a difficult behavior, we want to talk about who is the behavior even an issue for? Is it an issue for the resident? And an example I have is, it's funny, I was teaching this class, and it was actually at a day facility where they let all people with Alzheimer's come for the day, and they left. And I was teaching on this part, and the staff kind of cut eyes at each other and looked, and I said, what, you've got one of these. So this lady would rock back and forth and sing the same song over and over. You've seen this all day, right? But she's happy as a lark. Now, it's not beautiful, it's not in tune, but she's rocking and singing. She's probably self-soothing herself. The staff was making her crazy because she had sung this same song for the 200th time that day. She was fine. So was it a problem for the resident? No, she's just singing and having a grand old time. It was a problem for who? The staff. So then we have to determine, okay, is it really a problem at all? Do I need to just let it go and let this woman sing Amazing Grace at the top of her lungs 200 times in a row? Or do we need to address this? And that's what happens a lot, is it's a problem for the staff. So we try to fix this behavior because we don't want to deal with it, but the resident is fine. So sometimes it's not a problem at all. And we have to ask ourselves or remind ourselves, just because we don't like something does not mean it's a problem. So try to remember that when you're looking at something, if you're going to deal with it or not deal with it, just because we don't like it doesn't mean it's a problem. That's right. That's how I feel. I forgot to tell you this group. Y'all, I raked leaves for like 4 hours this weekend, and it stirred up all this dust and stuff, and I'm struggling, so I apologize for sounding a little bit like a frog. One of the things you want to do as well when you're looking at different behaviors is what are some of the most common triggers. And one of the most common triggers to bring on what we might label a difficult behavior is delusions or hallucinations. So a delusion is a fixed false belief. It's believing something that isn't true. And a hallucination is seeing, hearing, feeling things that aren't real. So I promise you, if I thought a snake was crawling across this floor, you would see some unusual behaviors coming out of me. Okay? Most of which would be screaming, yelling, breaking this window, and jumping out as quickly as possible, right? That wouldn't be normal behavior. But if I had a hallucination, that's what I would do. So you want to make sure they're not dealing with a delusion or hallucination. In a facility like this, most seniors are on multiple medications. So you always want to assess, was there a change in the medication? And could that change in medication have brought on this change in behavior? If you've got somebody who's normally active and willing to go and do stuff, and all of a sudden they're just sitting in a chair like this all the time, we want to look back at those medications. Or the opposite is true. They're usually pretty easy to get along with, and all of a sudden they're roaming up and down the halls and getting into everything, and they just seem really energetic and agitated. Same thing. Let's always look and see if there is a medication. You can also always assess for an infection or pain. What is the number one infection that will make a woman go from totally stable to off the charts? UTI, yeah. So you see those. She may not be able to tell you, wow, it really hurts when I go to the bathroom. Maybe I need to go to the doctor, okay? So we want to assess that. It might not be, if you've got a woman whose behavior changed drastically, not a bad idea just to get a urinalysis if you can and check for that, because it very well may be that. Or the resident may be in pain from some other cause. If you're not feeling well, you're probably not on your best behavior either, right? So we always want to look for that. We also want to assess for sleep or sensory deprivation. How many of you are in a great mood the day after you didn't get a good night's sleep, or if you tossed and turned a couple of nights? In a great mood? No.
Oh, yes.
Woo! I like you. So she doesn't require sleep. But a few nights ago, after I did the whole raking thing, I took some medicine to help me breathe so I could sleep. I didn't realize it had pseudoephedrine in it, which makes me just nutty. And so I was up all night long. So the next day, it was rough to get things done. I couldn't think, I couldn't focus, I didn't have any energy. So it really affected me. One night of bad sleep can totally change your cognition the next day. One night. And you also want to look for sensory deprivation. What do a lot of folks in your facility have for their senses? What kinds of things do a lot of them have? Glasses to see, hearing aids, dentures. Okay, so let me tell you the story about the lady who went to the ER. They were sitting at home watching a movie. Mom started experiencing some left arm pain, a little discomfort, so they went to the emergency room. Well, when you get to the emergency room, they rush the patient back, and you've got to fill out 275 pieces of paperwork, right? So the daughter's out there doing paperwork, doing insurance, and then she goes into the room where her mom is, and the doctor looks at her and says, "How long has your mom had dementia?" And the daughter says, "What are you talking about? She didn't have dementia. We were sitting at home watching a movie, and her arms hurt. Why would you ask that?" He said, "Well, we've been trying to ask her what happened and get information from her, and she's just kind of staring off, and she's not being responsive." And she said, "Wait a minute." So she looked. Mom didn't have her glasses on, because they take those things away when you're in the ER, because if they have to do anything to you, they don't want to break them. Mom didn't have her hearing aids in. She couldn't see what was going on, and she couldn't hear them talking to her. Of course she seemed like she had dementia or something and couldn't respond, but it was sensory deprivation. So when you're working with folks, try to keep in mind who wears glasses and who doesn't. If somebody's kind of looking around and seems out of it, maybe they're looking around trying to figure out where they are or what that thing on the wall is because they can't see. Go get their glasses. Or if they're non-responsive or don't seem to understand you when normally they do seem to understand you, check for hearing aids and make sure they're on, because I know that's a good trick to turn it down where they can't hear things, right? Sometimes just frustration or fear. They're frustrated about being told no all day long, and they just have enough of not being able to go through those doors or go down the hall or eat what they want. What about staff change at the facility? You guys ever notice that? That sometimes folks can get really agitated? Yeah. Well, if it's taken me 8 hours to get used to your face, and then this one with hair on his face comes in, and it was you without that, now I'm adjusting to these two differences, and I've got to start all over. So that's why it's so important when you go in and introduce yourself. Hey, Sally left. My name is Cindy. I'm going to be taking care of you the rest of the day. I'm your nurse. Next time you go in there 30 minutes later, don't assume she remembers you. Say, hey, Miss Jones, it's me, Cindy. How are you doing? Do you need anything? Just introduce yourself every single time, because it takes a while. That staff change can be very difficult. And then we want to look and see, are they bored, are they understimulated, or are they overstimulated? What's that expression about idle hands are the devil's? I mean, we're in church. So.
Idle hands create mischief.
Yeah, I mean, they create mischief, right? Well, that's true if you've got dementia or not, right? So if you have nothing, if they're not engaged and active at all, sometimes their brains are confused. They'll go find something to get into. Surely I'm supposed to be doing something. So they'll go, find something to do. Overstimulation does the same thing. When there's too much going on, if it's too noisy, there's too much activity, too much movement, that can really cause that agitation as well. So we want to evaluate for those as well. When we're talking about speaking to your residents with dementia, one of the most important things to do is get in their line of sight. So give them a wide berth. Don't go whooshing right beside them and then get in their face. Hey, Miss Jones. But get around them, get to where they can see you, and then begin speaking. Hey, Miss Jones, it's me, Cheryl. I'm your nurse. Because think about how disorienting it is. If I don't hear you coming up behind me, and my peripheral vision has gone from this to about this, I can't see you until you're about right here. So if you say something, it might really startle me because I didn't hear you coming and I didn't know anybody was there, and all of a sudden there's this voice, from beyond, right? That'd be pretty scary, wouldn't it? Any of y'all like to go to haunted houses and be in dark places? No, either. But think about if you're in a dark room and you don't hear it coming and don't see it and something grabs you, wouldn't that be terrifying? So that's kind of what it is. So we want to make sure we're in their line of sight, using a calm, soothing voice when we're speaking to them, not raising our voice, even if they're about to go out those doors and they can't, just, hey, Mr. Jones, hang on just a second, let me help you. And instead of you can't go out those doors, just trying to redirect him, trying to find a way to engage him. Speaking slowly and clearly, which I know I speak fast, so y'all feel free to point that out if you need to. And then allowing extra time for the person to respond. So we are so used to, if you text somebody, text right back. How many of y'all have read receipts on your kid's phone or your spouse's or whatever? Do you have that where you can say they read it? So I know you read it, why didn't you answer? Right? We're so used to instant. Well, it takes that person about 30 seconds. After you say something to them, it's about 30 seconds for them to process that before they're ready to respond. They've got to process it. Even if you say, hey, Mrs. Jones, how are you today? They got to figure out what all those words mean. What are my choices? How am I today? Well, how am I? How am I feeling? It takes a while. So give that extra time. For you, it can feel interminable. At 30 seconds, try this. No, we won't do it now, but just go up and speak to somebody and say, hey, how are you doing today? And then count. It seems like forever. It really does. But allow them that time to process what you've said. One thing that you can do to avoid creating a problem for yourself is let's make sure we're not offering choices where there really isn't a choice. So an example of that would be like, what would you like for lunch? What would you like to do today? What would you like to wear today? All right? Because if you ask someone with dementia, what would you like for lunch? First, I've got to think about what lunch is. Then I've got to think about the 340,000 possible combinations that could, in fact, be called lunch. Okay? So what are you going to do when I come up with something that you can't bring me? Right? It's going to be a problem. Well, you asked me what I wanted for lunch. What do you mean you can't bring me pizza from Sicily, Italy? You asked me what I wanted for lunch. I want my favorite pizza, right? So it seems like that's a fair way to ask that question, but what we want to do instead is offer between choices that are actually available. So if your kitchen that day has made lasagna and chicken soup with tomato soup with a sandwich, grilled cheese sandwich, say that. Would you rather have lasagna or the tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich? Those are the two choices. That way you're still giving them autonomy, you're allowing them a choice, but you're allowing them a choice between options that are readily available. If you come to me any day of the week and say, what would you like to do today? I'm gonna go, let's hop a plane to Paris. I love Paris. Wanna go to Paris? Let's go to Paris. That's not an option, right, in your facility. So instead of what would you like to do today, hey, guess what? Today, the animal shelter is bringing in some kittens, like at 1 to 2, you can hold the kittens, or we're gonna be painting a vase. Which would you rather do? Would you rather play with the kittens or paint the vase? Again, you're really still giving them a choice, but it's between options that really are available. Same thing with what they're gonna wear. Would you like to wear this red dress or this blue dress for when your son comes to visit today? instead of opening a wardrobe, what would you like to wear? How many of you women have an easy time answering that question anyway? No, I change 2 or 3 times every day. It's hilarious. So offer those simple choices, not open-ended questions. And anytime you can give them a choice between 2 items, 3 at the most, it's a lot better than just that open-ended, what would you like? What would you like to eat, to wear, to do, to blah, 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 okay? So think about that, because that's a way just to stop something from becoming an issue before you even create an issue accidentally. Some of the nonverbal tips, always, again, approaching from the front, maintaining eye contact, and stay in their line of vision. Again, that peripheral vision is to about here. By the time somebody has dementia, we know that their peripheral is not way out here. So if you're standing over here, guess what? I can't see you. I hear you, but I'm confused because I can't see you. So make sure you're over here in that line of vision. Get their eye contact so that you know that they know you're speaking to them, and then they can see your face and they can connect your facial expressions and your body language with what you're saying. Okay, so that's very helpful. So remember that facial expressions and body language are more important than the actual words that you say. Much more important. Then remember that we're going to move slowly and deliberately to get around them, because sudden movements can be frightening. Somebody mentioned earlier this morning about a man that was former military and something that happened to him. So imagine somebody who was former military, or even somebody like me whose brothers used to hide behind every single door and jump out and frighten me. To this day, if I went through that door, I'm gonna look both ways. Not kidding, it's just ingrained, because there was always somebody there waiting to grab me and tickle me. So, but imagine that, if I have an experience just with not knowing what's around the next corner. Maybe I was in the military, or maybe I had brothers who teased me a lot, and you all of a sudden show up and I didn't see you coming or didn't know you were coming and you're there, that could startle me. Well, once you startle somebody, before you can do what you're there to do, you gotta deal with the startle. You gotta calm them down. So you're already kind of operating from behind. So move slowly, deliberately, avoid that sudden movement. You can also always demonstrate what you're saying, like, Miss Jones, this feels a little warm in here. Let's take your coat off. You know, you can even show her with yours. We're just gonna take your coat off. And then when you reach and touch her coat, she knows that you're not reaching up, you know, to strangle her, or you're not reaching up to harm her or steal her necklace. You're showing them, let's take your shoes off, or something like that. And most importantly, and I said in the last group, is there a boss in here? So like a director of nursing or a boss? Who's the boss?
Well, she was coughing.
She was the cougher.
Yeah.
She left? I wanted her to hear this. Okay, so don't force a person with dementia to do something against their will. I don't care if it's on your schedule. If you're supposed to bathe 8 people today, if they will not cooperate, if they're getting upset and anxious, that checklist of yours is not nearly as important as making that person feel safe and secure. And I like to say that in front of your bosses, because I know what it's like. If you've got your list of assignments and this is what you're supposed to do.
She's on board with that.
Excellent.
No, we don't do that in this facility. We leave it up to the resident what they want to do. We have a schedule, but
Good.
no.
And the difficulty with that is that if I come in and it's my mom, I'm gonna look at you and go, my mother does not smell. Why has my mother not had a bath?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you have
Well,
that
you
boss
make a
that'll come around and
suggestion
explain
if
it.
it's something, you know, like that.
Good. But that's good that you have that support, because sometimes getting that bath or getting whatever else it is done is not nearly as important as that person feeling safe and secure. If they're getting upset and fighting it, just let it go. Then we also want to remember that when you're dealing with somebody with dementia, you are dealing with 2 realities. There's their reality and there's your reality. And let's talk through a couple of things. I've got a patient right now that we're dealing with that when his son comes to visit him, he says, they never feed me. And the son's like, what are you talking about? He says, they haven't fed me breakfast or lunch today, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm walking this through. Okay, wait, I seriously doubt this place is just not feeding the man, so let's try to find out what's going on. What I know about dementia is there's short-term memory loss. You probably fed him breakfast and lunch, he's forgotten. So what are we gonna do? Are we gonna try to remind him of everything that happened that day? We're gonna say, Mr. Jones, now you know you had breakfast. It was waffles and bacon. It's your favorite. You ate every bite of it. And Mr. Jones, you know I came in here and brought your lunch because you wanted pizza today. Mr. Jones, you know we wouldn't let you starve. He doesn't, or he wouldn't be saying you hadn't fed him. So operate in his reality. So you might say something like, oh, Mr. Jones, my goodness, you must be starving to death. Let me run down to the break room and find you a snack. And you want to let everybody else know that he is saying this so that if he's really hungry, give him a snack, help him feel better. Maybe his stomach is just growling and he's decided, oh, stomach growling, I'm hungry, wait, nobody's fed me. Because he's pulling from little jumbled pieces of memory trying to put things together, right? Another thing that happens a lot is they're very concerned about children. Always worried about a child being in danger. They'll see children or hear children. It doesn't bother them that a child lives in their attic. It bothers them that the TV is too loud. So instead of saying, yeah, Mama, you know nobody lives in your attic. Nobody's living up in your attic. She wasn't upset about somebody living in the attic. What was she upset about? The TV was too loud, Mom. You're right. They are playing that TV way too loud. Let me go up there and tell them to turn that down. Okay? So listen to what she's concerned about and approach that. I'm worried about that little boy. He's going to get hurt. Our normal response to that might be, no, Miss Cheryl, there's no little boy under there. I don't see anything. What are you talking about? Don't do that. If she sees a little boy, we're going to operate on the assumption that there's a little boy. What can we do to help? Oh my goodness, you're right. He is going to get hurt if he keeps playing there. He needs to get back to his mom. Let's take you to your room and get you settled. I'll come back and get him and I'll go find his mom, okay? You don't worry about it anymore. I'm going to take care of it. Now, what have you done for her?
Put her at ease.
Took that worry away from her, right? Why? Because I'm going to take care of it. She doesn't have to worry about it anymore. My son never comes to visit. Y'all ever see folks crying that their son or daughter never comes to visit and you know they were just here yesterday or maybe even 2 hours ago? So instead what we want to do is say, oh, your son loves you so much. He always comes to visit. He was just here today and you had that lovely lunch. No, she doesn't know. If she knew, she wouldn't be crying. So instead, listen to her. She's missing him. What can I say to her? Wow, you're really missing your son today, aren't you? Tell me about your son. Isn't he the one that lives in Nashville? He's a singer, right? So try to know some of those stories so that when she gets upset, you can bring some of those in. The other thing that's always important to think about is if something a long or lifelong behavior, or is it later in life? So a lifelong behavior, things like, are you a morning person or not? Do you like breakfast? Do you not? Are you talkative? Are you not? Some of those things you may never change. And I don't care how good your breakfast is or how great your chef is, I am not an early morning eater. I need to be awake for a couple of hours. So if your breakfast, in some of these facilities, the breakfast is like 6, you'll see me at breakfast. Don't even think about it. And so I'm going to be here a week, and you're all going to be concerned because we can't get Miss Blanchard to eat breakfast. We don't know what to do. She just refuses to eat breakfast. So you're going to call my son, and my son's going to say, well, what time do you serve breakfast? And when you say 6 a.m., you're going to hear him laughing on the other end of the phone because he's going to go, Mama ain't going to be up at 6 a.m. eating breakfast. That is a lifelong behavior of mine. And it's not going to change just because I live in your facility, okay? So sometimes we have to work with that. You're going to create issues with me if you try to force me to be up, be dressed, and be anywhere by 6 a.m. It's not going to be pretty. But is it because I'm a difficult resident? No, it's because you're trying to make me and my lifelong behaviors fit into this mold of the facility serves breakfast at 6. So what could you do for me instead?
Put the food in the room and whenever you wake up there.
There you go. Let me eat it when I wake up. Make sure that I've got snacks and things. Find out from my family. Tell me what your mom was like at home. Is she a big breakfast eater? Because I'm not. Is she an early breakfast eater? I'm not. Learn that, and that can help you kind of adjust things so that I'm still getting the calories I need and the food that I need, and you don't have anybody telling you I'm not being fed, but yet it's working into my schedule. Now, if I always come to breakfast and I eat well and you don't have issues with me and all of a sudden I'm refusing or I'm refusing to eat or won't, now we might have something we need to look at. And let's find out what triggered that change in behavior. Maybe my dentures don't fit well anymore. Maybe I've got a tooth that's infected or it's causing me pain, okay? So we're gonna look at all those things and find out. If we can figure out the trigger, we might can avoid that particular behavior, okay? You also want to look at the who, what, when, and where. So who? How many of you have ever had a resident that just didn't like you? Has that happened? No, it happened to other girls. Okay. I'm so glad it was you. Let me give you an example. When, this is my little girl.
I don't know what I did, that's the thing.
Let me tell you, you might have done anything.
Well, I think I just reminded her of somebody that did something wrong to her in the past.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Because every time, and it was downstairs.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
No, you're fine. and it was somebody down here, and it was somebody who did her wrong in the past.
Oh,
Because every
yes,
time I
know
came
what you're
around,
talking-
like,
yes, I remember.
I could come right at her,
Uh-huh.
be as sweet as can be,
Yeah.
like, I could be God himself, and I was
Yeah.
not doing something right.
Yeah.
She hated me.
Well, I mean, you could have been a boyfriend that did her wrong. That's what you might look like. But my daughter, my youngest daughter, she's 16 now, she had a doctor that had a beard. And I didn't think anything about it, but every time a man with a beard spoke to her, looked at her, if it was a friend of ours that was going to hold her, she would scream and pull away and pitch a fit. And it took me a while. It finally dawned on me, the only person in her life that has facial hair is her doctor. And when they're little, they get shots constantly.
Yeah.
She associates him. Oh my gosh. And it was hilarious. If she had a beard, couldn't deal with it. So good for you. You're exactly right. So are you going to get all upset and have your feelings hurt and think you're going to be punished because she doesn't like you? No, you're going to let her do it instead. You know, find somebody else to do that task, because it's not nearly as important that my feelings are not hurt or this person likes me than it is to make sure they get what they need. But you're exactly right. A lot of times it could be the woman who tried to steal their man. You know, she may look like a woman, or she may look like a mean girl from high school. We don't know, but we're not going to force that. Sometimes certain people are just going to push their buttons, so just find somebody else to do that. What it could be, this in the earlier session we talked about a man who they had difficulty getting a shower. Okay, let it go. Shower time was difficult for him. We got to find another way to work that. He's great all day, every day. Shower time just isn't working. So it's the what. Sometimes it's the when. For your sundowners, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? It's go. It's high speed at that time. And then where? Sometimes it might be that they're in the only time they're difficult is they're in the dining room. Why might that be? It's loud, it's busy, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of distractions, it's overwhelming. So that who, what, when, and where, sometimes if you evaluate that, and like I said, sometimes you're playing detective trying to figure out what's going on. Some of the things you never want to do is argue, correct. How do you feel? How many of y'all have kids? How many of your kids correct you on technology constantly? Does it drive you crazy? It's like, I changed your
I
diaper.
just take it away.
Well, yeah, there you go. It's like, I gave you birth. What are you doing? Tell me what to do. My daughter loves to tell me what I'm doing wrong on my iPhone. It's hilarious. I'm like, why does this matter to you? Because I don't care. Mom, you're doing that wrong. Mom, you need to have it on night setting. But it bugs me because I'm her mother. I don't want her always telling me what to do. So imagine being a resident here and all of you are about half their age telling them what to do all day, every day. Right? So try not to correct. No, Mr. Jones, you can't go in there. No, you can't do that. No, you need to come over here. Don't argue, don't question. How many of you like to be asked why you did something? Why are you sitting there like that? Why are you holding your wallet? Are you going somewhere? I mean, why? Why are you having that cup in your hand? You know, it always feels like what?
Yeah, interrogation.
Yeah, or an accusation. Right, exactly. So when trying to avoid the why question and come up with another way to ask that question, because those why questions seem to... Don't try to convince them, don't take it personally, and don't let your frustration show. And then some of the things you always want to do, validate their concerns. Wow, you're really upset that your son hasn't come to visit. I know how much you miss him. Wow, I know that really means a lot to you when he comes. Acknowledge their feelings. I'm sorry you're feeling so sad today. Or I'm sorry you feel that way. Be sure to pick your battles. Like for you, maybe that woman absolutely positively had to take some medicine and you were trying to do it, but she had that reaction to you. The right thing to do is let that go and find somebody else to do that rather than forcibly trying to make her do what you knew she needed to do. Right? Pick your battles, because sometimes if somebody's going to hurt themselves, you absolutely have to intervene and stop or hurt another resident. And then thinking about the R's, rethinking, is the behavior harmful or can we just live with it? If you can redirect to some activity or some other diversion or distraction, reassure, you seem upset, can I help you? And then always respond to the emotion or the need. When we're looking at whatever these behaviors are, remember again, look at the trigger, the who, what, when, where, why. Are they in pain? Do they need to go to the bathroom? Are they hungry? Are they afraid? Has something just happened, like a shift change, or maybe their son or daughter did come to visit and left, and it's reminded them they're here, they're alone, their family isn't here. Think about that. Think about if a change in environment will help for people, especially in the big crowded rooms. If they don't handle that well, could they do that same activity in a smaller setting? So if you've got somebody who's just really agitated in the big dining room, would they eat their meal if they were in a smaller room? And I've seen that happen. When they went to a smaller, quieter place, they would eat every bite. But if you put them in the big dining room, it's just too much, and they're using all of their energy just to cope with everything going in there, and they won't eat. So change the environment. Sometimes that helps. Or would a distraction help? I want to tell you about a patient I worked with. I work with patients that are on dialysis, and I had this sweet little lady named Caroline. My very first day at the dialysis clinic, the staff there knew that I worked with dementia, and I walked in, I kid you not, some of the first words spoken to me were not, "Hey, we're glad to have you. Oh, it's good to have you." It was, "You're the one that works with dementia?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We need you to do something with her." And I went, "Okay." It was great. So we had a lady who screamed out a lot. She made a lot of vocalizations. Have any of you ever been in a dialysis clinic? Okay. Well, it's chair, 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 chair. Much like if you've ever been to a chemo clinic, it's chair, 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 chair. They've got their arms out. There's these machines. There's lots of bells and whistles and buzzes. Staff running around like crazy. It is a busy, busy place. Okay. So Caroline's in there, and she would scream out, and she would say, "I need to move my bowels. I need to move my bowels." So my first thing was to say, "Oh, does she need to go to the bathroom?" And I would ask them. They said, "No, it's not that. We've unhooked her. We've taken her to the bathroom. She never does anything. We can't do that every time because it's a big deal to take somebody off the machine." And I said, "Okay." So the first thing we did was we moved her because she was in the middle of the room and all this activity was all over. And I said, "Can we at least move her to the end of the room and maybe put a shade up?" I did that. That worked for a while. Then she started up again. And again, it was all this, "I need to move my bowels. I need to move my bowels." So we put her back in the isolation room. I got permission to use that because we could close the door, we could see her, it was glass, but I gave her books with the zoo books with animals, and I would put her TV on the Animal Planet because she just always kind of was drawn to that. So she would look at the animals, and that worked for a while, but she still continued to scream, "I gotta move my bowels, gotta move my bowels." So finally, I decided I gotta figure this out. So I talked to her husband, and this is what I say, was sometimes you're solving a mystery. What would make it easier for this person? What would make them more comfortable? What can we try that hasn't been tried? So I go to her husband and I say, "Tell me a little bit about your morning." So she got there at 11. You're on dialysis about 3.5 to 4 hours. You're at that clinic about 5 to 5.5 by the time you get there, wait, get hooked up, have your treatment, get disconnected, and get ready to leave. It's a long day. He got her up, he got her dressed, he fed her breakfast. That was probably about 8 o'clock. She got to the clinic at 11. Do you think they had time for lunch? How long did I say she was there? 3:30, 4 o'clock. "I need to move my bowels." What do you think she might have been trying to say? She's starving to death. So her stomach is rumbly and uncomfortable and painful, and she did not know how to say, "I am starving." So I said, "Oh my gosh, let's try this. I think she's hungry." Went to the dietitian. What can we give her? Because it's very specific for them. We started making sure she always had a snack available, and I would sit with her and help her eat when I could, and it lessened dramatically. And I don't tell you that story to pat my back or anything. It was a team of us that worked on this to figure it out. I tell you that story to say that sometimes some of these behaviors, if we can just get to the trigger and figure out what's going on and meet that need, we can lessen them significantly. So she was a lot of fun. All right, wondering is something you see a lot of. So some of the things you want to address with wondering is, what are they agitated about? Did something happen that upset them? You can redirect them to a meaningful activity. If they're walking a lot, you might just say, "Oh, I see you're already on the way. You know what, I'm headed down here to the lunchroom because it's about lunchtime. I'm just going to walk with you." Just redirect them to a meaningful activity. If you can allow it, if there's a path they can follow and they're not aggravating other residents going in their rooms, just let them go. It's great exercise. You know, they're wondering, again, are they happy? If they're tootling around walking and they're not bothering you or bothering anybody else, sometimes we can just let that go. Let them get that exercise. They might be more tired at night and they'll go to bed for you. Reassure them if they seem disoriented, but with a wanderer, as with a sundowner, always don't go up and touch them. Don't touch from behind. Don't approach from behind. Always give them their line of vision before you start speaking. And you can always ask them, "Hey, where are you going?" "Well, let me walk with you for a minute. And you know what? We need to finish up this walking because it's time for blah, blah. Or we need to head back to your room because we've got so-and-so going on." Just try to redirect them back to where you need them to be. If there are places that are dangerous that they really need to stay out of, they may not understand the words, "Mr. Jones, you can't go through those doors because that's where the kitchen is," but they might understand what? A stop sign. They still would remember what a big red sign is, or a "do not enter" or "staff only." So anything you can do for that to make it look like this is a place I'm not allowed to go. And the other thing is disguising doors. So So sometimes in homes, if there's a door that a resident just really, really showing a lot of behavior, trying to get out the door, we would put floor to ceiling curtains and draw them and have that door. Because how many of you come and go through a window? We don't do that, right? But if we see a door, oh, that's a door. What are you supposed to do? Come and go through doors, right? They don't come and go through windows, so things like that sometimes help. And then if you have to go to the doorknob guards, just make sure they're ones that the staff can easily get out of. Because the ones I had when my kids were little, I couldn't. So make sure that it's safe. With sundowning, similar to the wandering, a lot of the same approaches, but with that, you also want to limit their napping during the day. And I know sometimes that's hard to do in a busy facility. If they're tired and go to their room, you can't go around banging pots together to keep everybody awake. But that's one of the biggest things is if you sleep all day, guess what you're ready to do about 5, 6 o'clock? You're ready to go because you've got your energy, right? So if you can limit that. Some of the ways to do that are by making the earlier parts of the day more active. So make the earlier part of the day, hopefully when the doctors come to visit, when the families come to visit, when most of the activities are, when they get their hair done, all those kinds of things. And then decrease the level of activity as the day goes on. Some facilities have lights that'll automatically start dimming down, but if you don't, you can close the blinds, turn down a few of the lights, just to show that morning time, daytime, midday, that's our active, that's our go time, that's when the sun is up, and then as the day goes on, it starts getting a little darker, starts calming down, and this is when we rest. Eliminate caffeine if you can, and then you want to engage in calming activities later in the day. So if you have an activities person, the active games, the fun, the laughter, that happens earlier, but maybe some nice stretches or what happened in the afternoon, or maybe you put on the really soothing music in the afternoon and have quieter activities. Always, if wandering, agitation, or sundowning are new, again, evaluate those medications. Sometimes it's just a medication change and it will set off this burst of energy and things like that. And ultimately, as with anything else, you're going to respond to the emotion, not necessarily the behavior. Not you can't go in there, you can't go, but hey, what's going on? And let's talk, and how are you feeling? And if they say something to you, take it seriously and work with them. And with delusions and hallucination, the key question you want to ask is this causing this resident any discomfort? Is it upsetting them? Is it causing aggression? Is it causing unwanted behaviors? If not, let it go. Don't contradict that belief, okay? So like one thing that happens often is they're talking to a dead relative and you'll say, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, I was just talking to my mom. She came to visit. Oh, and you know their mom's been dead 20 years? Now, the family is going to want her to know that mom's been dead 20 years. For some reason, they really struggle. They feel like it's lying to her if they let her believe that she had a conversation with mom. But as the staff that's caring for her, you can look at her. Is she smiling? Is she happy? Does this bring her pleasure? Does this bring her happiness? And you can help the family, answer the question, why would we take that away from her? Does it matter? It does not. So, did you have a good conversation? Yes. Well, I'm so glad. I know you enjoy talking to your mom. And then move on. You don't have to make it a big, huge, elaborate story or even a lot of detail. Just acknowledge those feelings and then move on. On the other hand, if they're having a delusion, hallucination that causes anxiety, fear, agitation, that one we're going to have to deal with. And I used the snake earlier. You got to deal with that seriously. Please get me out of here and get that thing out of here. If they're saying my son never comes to visit, instead of trying to correct, yes, he does. He was just here. Just sympathy, empathy, understanding. I know you really miss him when he's not here. You were really close to your son, weren't you? Tell me about him. And just let them talk. So respond to the emotion, not the content. Go with it. We talked about earlier, we got to live in the Alzheimer's world, not drag them back into our world. We've got to communicate on the things that are true to them, not try to drag them back to the truth as we know it. If they believe it, it's the truth. So we don't have to worry about we're lying or we're making them believe something that isn't true, because if they believe it, it's the truth. So we have to respond in their truth. Address the problem and offer to help, like we talked about with the little boy. Let me take care of him. You go back to your room. I'll make sure we find his mom. So let's talk about a couple of examples. I already did the talking to a deceased relative, but let me tell you, my first experience with dementia was probably when I was about 14 or 15, had no idea what it was, but my great-grandmother was in a nursing home. And we would go and visit my great-grandmother, and she would talk about the 3 little Indian boys that lived under her bed. So what are some things you might wanna know about the 3 little Indian boys living under her bed? If I'm telling you there are 3 little Indian boys living under my bed, what might we wanna know about that before we addressed it?
Do they look familiar to you?
That might be a good one. Do it look familiar to you? What about me? Oh my goodness, those little Indian boys. How am I looking? Do I care? I don't seem to care, do I? Don't care. Nanny didn't care there were 3 little Indian boys living in her bed. So Mama didn't waste a lot of time trying to convince her that they weren't, because guess what? To my nanny, didn't matter. It was just a statement of fact, just like, you're my granddaughter, you're my great-granddaughter, and there are 3 little Indian boys living in my bed. She did not care. So no reason to address that. Now, we said, what are they doing? Are they bothering you? She said, they take my cookies. Every day they come and they take my cookies. So keep in mind, she didn't care that 3 little Indian boys lived in her bed. What'd she care about?
Cookies.
So what could we do?
Get an extra stack.
That's what we did. We got her some more cookies. So we got her little plastic container, we got her some Oreos, put a lid on it, hid it under her nightgowns and let her know, hey, we're hiding these here in your gown, because those little boys aren't gonna go looking under your lady things to find your cookies. So they're fine, they're right there. Made her feel better. We calmed her down. Didn't have to convince her that there weren't 3 little Indian boys. Then I had another lady who thought there was a snake in her room. And when the kids went to pick her up for an evening out for Christmas Eve, she had her backpack because she was not going back to stay there because there was a snake in her room. She just knew it. So one son tried to convince her, no, there's not, Mom. You know, there's not a snake in the room. This is a nice facility, blah, blah, blah. And the other son said, oh my goodness, well, we need to take care of that. And he went up and pretended to talk to the staff and said, we all take care of that. Mama, we're gonna take you out to eat. They said they'll take care of it. We'll check when we get back. They got back, he checked. Guess what he found? He found a curled up extension cord, no, a cord for a lamp. So he made sure he unwound that and moved it because to her that looked like a snake. Came back out, told her everything's fine, they took care of it, so she stayed in her room. Next day was Christmas. Daughter-in-law calls her to say, I'm gonna come pick you up for Christmas dinner. And she said, well, will he be there? She was still mad at the son who didn't believe her and who didn't do anything to help her with that snake. Now, she might not have been able to tell you why she was upset with him, but she remembered the emotion of being very angry with him because he basically called her a what?
Why?
Nobody likes to be called a liar. She's telling him there is a snake in my room. And he's like, Mama, no, there's not. You know there's not. There's not a snake. Well, he basically called her a liar. And the other son addressed it, went with it, stepped into Alzheimer's world and helped her, and she was fine. So that's a friend of mine that happened to, and I thought it was really funny. So ultimately asked, does it matter? Does it matter that they believe Herbert Hoover is president? Nope. Does it matter that they believe Dolly Parton is the Queen of England? Nope. Does it matter they think a deceased relative is still alive? Absolutely not. And here's the thing about correcting them about deceased relatives. If they have forgotten, do we really want to make them grieve again? Do you really want to tell them your daughter died again? Do you really want to bring that up again? Just let it go, it doesn't matter. But oftentimes you have to model these behaviors for families, because to families, they've always felt like the right thing to do is make sure Mama knows the truth. Mama needs to know. She needs to know that her son is dead, or she needs to know. No, she doesn't. So if you're in the room, you might can model it, and when they start to say, Mama, you know Joey's dead, say, really, I didn't know you had a son named Joey. Tell me about him. Just model it, because sometimes seeing you all do it is better than, yeah.
I've actually had families think that the correcting makes their brain work better if you keep, telling them things, and I've had to say, that really isn't the case.
And that's the hardest thing, because we have to remember that we're the ones that have all this training and the families don't, and
Right.
they're just really coping the very best way that they can.
Right.
But that's not the best thing. Correcting them is just gonna make them mad, because you're either calling them a liar or upsetting them or making them believe something that they didn't know was true, like they've lost a child or whatever. So you're right, families will do that a lot. So, when they're saying, I wanna go home, you don't wanna convince them this is your home, you don't live there anymore, just ask them, oh, well, tell me about your home. Do you have a front porch? What do you like to do at home? What would you be doing right now if you were home? Just ask a couple of questions, let them talk about it, and then redirect to whatever. Ask them what makes their home special, but don't try to convince them this is their home, because it's not. This is a facility you're living in right now. Even if we all know their house was sold and they'll never get to go back home, we don't want to convince them this is their home. So just let them talk about it. And one thing that we can do a lot is say, right now the doctor feels like this is the best place for you. I know you want to go home, I know you do, but right now this is where you need to be. This is where the doctor wants you to be. And then you can encourage involvement in some of the new things. Asking the same question over and over. That ever happened? That's a fun one. Just putting reminders, whiteboards, calendars, little sticky notes in their room. If you walk by their hallway, you might just give little reminders. Now, Miss Sally, don't forget. Well, no, don't say don't forget. But you know what, Miss Sally, we're doing bingo at 4 o'clock today. I know how much you love bingo. And then that might just work. That she doesn't come to you and say, what are we doing today? Or when is bingo? Or whatever. Just to find different ways to respond. If you have it on calendars and whiteboards or big boards, you can always say, you know, that's a good question. Why don't you go look on that board for me? Or go look at your calendar. At least you've got options besides answering the question over and over. So whiteboards, calendars, pictures, notes in the bathroom, posted schedules, and then routine and repetition are really valuable in facilities like this. And ultimately, just take a deep breath and tell them again. Just take a deep breath and go, bingo's at 4 o'clock, Miss Sally, just like the last 20 times I told you. Sometimes we just have to do that because they truly don't remember. Ultimately, what you want to remember is the goal. And the goal here is providing the best possible care for residents. And providing the best possible care does not mean they do every activity or that we force them to shower at 2 o'clock because that's when they were on the schedule. And also, it doesn't mean that the families are always happy with us because sometimes what we know is best for that resident is not what the family thinks is best, and we're always educating them. So it's important as you guys leave today to remember that sometimes providing the very best care for these folks may not look like what you thought. May not look like what you thought it was going to look or what the family thinks it should look like. All right. Do y'all have any questions or any other stories? I love hearing y'all's stories. I use them.